As Valessandria traveled through the outer city, where many of the civilians and merchants lived, she was continually acknowledging those who called out to her. With her background as a commoner, many saw her as an inspiration and admired how she was able to attain her position. The other posts on the council were held by those that were part of the nobility. Even though the city claimed not to have a division between those who came from nobility and those who didn't, many nobles still made a big deal about their lineage. Compared to other countries, inside Illumin, many nobles would spend time in prison cells for committing offenses. In other nations, the nobility may get away with criminal and civil acts, but inside of this city, the Peacekeeper Company did a remarkable job at punishing those who broke the law. There was a slight difference when someone entered the center ring, where the academy was located, because nobles had slightly more powers. Since a lot of the city's revenues came from the students, the council would sometimes be more lenient if the offender was a noble. This caused her no end of frustration, considering how her job was to make sure that this wasn't the case. The problem was that she was the only commoner on the council, so her voice was often drowned out by the other members. Though she may not be able to lock up a noble, there were other methods she could rely on. This came in the forms of fines and restrictions, where she would not allow the nobles to have access to the servants for however many days. Reaching the inner circle, there was a large gate where only students were allowed to pass through. The squad that was part of the academic company and a squad of the disciplinary committee were checking the various identification cards of the students. Even though there was plenty of things to do inside the academy, students would go out into the outer rings to enjoy various activities. One of the members of the disciplinary committee noticed her approaching and yelled out, "All attention, the Lady Knight!" Both squads stopped what they were doing and formed rows to present themselves. The gate was open and she was able to pass through. When it came to the gate, there was the main entrance and the side gate, which was for the students. The main entrance was used for those in higher position and supplies coming into the academy. As she passed by the students, many of the girls called out her name to try and get her attention. For some reason, Valessandria had a fan club composed of only women that would call out to her. Shops inside and outside the academy would sell posters showing off her golden hair and striking blue eyes. Compared to other girls her age, she had a more developed body, which got her more attention from both boys and girls. Due to her childhood in the village, Valessandria never considered herself to be attractive and thought that she was plain looking. She felt that the attention mainly stemmed from her position as head of the disciplinary committee. Going through the gates led her to the residential section of the academy. Nearly a quarter of the inner circle was dedicated to the residential area. The first 2/3 was devoted to dormitories, where usually the commoners lived, with the last third of the section was dedicated to housing, where many of the nobles lived. Going down the main road, you would see a lot of shops aimed towards students. Getting closer to the center, the quality and style would see a significant improvement to cater to those who had money. The housing units were more spaced out and looked luxurious. In the distance, Valessandria could see the larger homes that were assigned to the student council members. These houses looked comparable to those owned by the nobility in other countries, where servants would cater to the needs of the members. Reaching the tower, she got off of her horse and handed the reins to one of the attendants. Entering, she still marveled at how beautiful it all looked. There were high ceilings with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. When you entered the tower, the first thing you notice is the various departments with their counters. Students are seen continuously waiting to talk with the person on duty, and depending on the department, they would sometimes turn in assignments, tokens provided for completing various tasks, paperwork to enter the department, or changing to a different department. This part of the tower always looked busy. Walking up the stairs, in the center of the tower, she reached the second floor, where various practice rooms were located. Though each department had a practice area for those to improve their skills, the training rooms in the tower were superior for students to use. Once she was on the second floor, she headed to the elevators where she could reach the very top of the tower. If needed, you could walk the full length of the tower, but considering the tower had 100 floors, walking was not recommended. You could sometimes see someone walking the entire length for training purposes, but those types were in the minority. The popular method was to take the elevator. The floors were divided into various sections, the first being for students, the second for the academic company, the third for the disciplinary committee, the fourth for the treasury committee, the fifth for the records committee, the sixth for the public relations committee, the seventh for the vice president, and the eighth for the president. The last floor, at the very top, was only for the student council to meet and discuss various topics. Every student was allowed to gain access to the first floor of every section after the first section, which was open to all students. Entry into the last level was only allowed if you had a student council ID card, which you gained access to by swiping it over a mana crystal. Swiping her card, Valessandria felt the elevator suddenly surge upwards to the very top floor. When the doors opened, she stepped off and saw an area that would belong in most palaces. The floor was made out of marble, and there were polished granite columns all throughout the floor. Lighting for the floor came from large mana crystals. There were rare plants placed in visually appealing locations, keeping the appearance of luxury alive. There was a marble counter where several secretaries were patiently waiting. They made sure that only those with permission entered this floor. Though they looked beautiful, each one of them was part of an elite force that answered only to the student council president. "Welcome, Lady Knight. The student council is waiting for your presence," one of the secretaries said to her. Not bothering to respond, she walked towards one of the arches on either side of the counter. Walking down a long hallway, she reached a large door which opened when she got near. Going through the doorway, she saw a large crescent table with the members of the student council sitting in each of their separate seats. Above each of the members was a flag hanging from the ceiling with the individual member's symbol. As the head of the disciplinary committee, her symbol was a sword and gavel, both pointing towards the sky, with a wolf's head in the middle. The gavel and sword represent the committee's commitment towards pursuing justice, regardless of the dangers, and the wolf's head expressed their loyalty to the council, since wolves were thought to be noble and loyal animals. Instead of walking to her seat, she presented herself in front of the table where all the members could see her. She understood that she was here because she went against her orders and wasn't here as part of the council. Directly in front of her, Valessandria could see the president, Nathaniel. With both palms together, Nathaniel was resting his head on his thumbs. He usually looked like this when he is frustrated about something. "Valessandria, do you understand why you are standing before the council?" Nathaniel asked her. Taking a deep breath, she answered, "Yes, I went against the wishes of the council and took students to Leaf Village to fight the soldiers sent by the Empire." Other members started whispering among themselves at how audacious Valessandria was acting. The way she behaved, it was as if she didn't do anything wrong and thought this whole matter was meaningless. "Please explain, why did you do this? You know, before going there, that there was nothing you could do. Illumin is a neutral territory, and we don't get involved in the affairs of the kingdom. With your actions, you could have jeopardized what we have accomplished for hundreds of years." Nathaniel scolded her. The problem was that the kingdom was more focused on protecting themselves instead of thinking about those living in the village. I could not, in good conscience, let the village be abandoned. I know what I did was wrong, and I am willing to submit to whatever punishment the council deems justified, she calmly answered. As an afterthought, Valessandria said, "While I'm here, I would like to give this to the treasurer. I was given this by a parent of a student, but the amount received is quite large." Walking up to the treasurer, she placed the platinum bar in front of her. The father is named Han, and his son will be staying in one of the housing units. The boy will be bringing along servants, though the quantity is unknown. Considering the amount he has paid up front, I would recommend the largest house we have aside from my own. The treasurer, Alice, had her jaw open the moment she saw the bar. When she realized her jaw was open, she recovered herself and said, "Yes, I think that would be the best course of action. Considering you have met the father, I recommend that you meet with the boy when he arrives. I will organize everything so that it is ready when he gets here. Since we are opening up for exams the day after today, it may be a bit tight, but I think we will have everything finished." When Valessandria walked back to where she was standing, the other members were staring at her in amazement. Who would have thought that her going to fight would land them a student of considerable wealth? Looking a lot calmer, Nathaniel placed his hands on the table and said, "This is very unexpected. Though you did disobey the council, in light of recent events, we will say that your discovery canceled out your disobedience. There will be no disciplinary actions charged so that you may resume your duties." Bowing her head, Valessandria walked to her seat and sat down. Many of the other members were still staring at her, either in admiration or disbelief with how she was able to escape punishment. "Since you were at Leaf Village, the council would like for you to give your report on what occurred. How many of the villagers were killed, and how many were you able to evacuate?" Nathaniel asked her. "My force and I reached the village right when the soldiers had sent a large number of fire-related spells at the village. We initially thought there was going to be a great many casualties, but when I entered the village, I discovered no such events to have occurred. Aside from the villagers running away from the attack, there was no damage to the village itself." This caused an uproar among some of the members. Ignoring the commotion, she continued, "As I made my way through the village and reached the entrance facing away from the capital, I saw the bodies of thousands of enemy troops. As I got closer, I could not ascertain what happened. This is where I met Han, the father of the student that will be arriving here. I investigated the matter and was unable to learn anything more. Briefly talking with the villagers, no one had seen what happened after the large explosion. This is understandable, considering most of the people were very focused on surviving the attack. Going to where Han was staying, I talked with him some more and was unable to get additional information out of him. After my questions, he asked me about enrolling his son and gave me that bar," Valessandria said, pointing at the platinum bar in front of Alice. Though initially, there were members who clamored about the validity of the story, after listening to her, they couldn't find anything wrong with her report. The only odd thing was how the Empire's forces were defeated, but considering how she received the amount that she did, they understood why she returned so quickly. Even if an invasion force from the Empire was big news, it still only affected the kingdom and not them. Many students came from the Empire, so they didn't worry about being attacked without warning. Even if they were attacked, they had sufficient amount of defensive strength to hold out for any reinforcements from other nations. Afterward, the council talked about minor issues and the preparations for the new students coming in. Once they were finished discussing these topics, The president concluded the meeting and dismissed them. As each of them made way towards the elevators, Alice approached Valessandria and asked, "What was this man Han like? Considering how wealthy he was, I'm sure there would be something special about him." Being the treasurer, Alice often measured a person's worth by his economic power. This was an obvious flaw in her personality and why she was so good at her job. I guess you could call him attractive. He had long dark brown hair and eyes, which were brilliant and seemed like they could see right through a person. Like I mentioned earlier, his face was fairly handsome, though with his oval face, it could border on looking beautiful. His build was someone who likely trained, but not to the degree of a knight. When I first met him, he told me that he was a simple magician. I don't know what kind of abilities a magician has, but I'm assuming he can wield magic. Maybe where he comes from, mages are called magicians? His servants were beautiful, to the point where even women would find themselves attracted to them. He also seemed like someone who was used to wielding power. Valessandria summed up her description of Han while she was telling Alice. Alice looked like she was trying to memorize all the information. If you're thinking of pursuing him, I would advise against it. Considering how beautiful his servants are, his wife is probably stunning and far outclasses you, she tried to advise her friend. Tossing her hair back, Alice said, "My family is an influential one with a long history. I can also be considered to be one of the top beauties in the empire, with many nobles chasing after me. If this man is as amazing as you say, it wouldn't hurt to look into his background more. I'm sure that I'll be able to charm him." Though Alice was her friend, she sometimes found her arrogance to be grating. The problem was that most nobles thought like her, so it was something she had to get used to.